So are you looking into this camera?
Yes, 2 seconds. Welcome back, pregame.tv. Steve Fezzik here with college basketball expert, pretty much expert in all the sports, Teddy Covers. Pleased as punch to be here with Mr. Covers, breaking down college basketball tournament action. We're going to talk about basic strategy, and in fact, the studio we are taping in, it is Tuesday right now. It's right in the shadows of the Orleans Arena, where tonight BYU and Gonzaga will be going for the championship of the West Coast Conference. But we're going to be talking about all the conference championships and the tournament action, basic strategies to follow, things to look to bet on, things you might want to avoid. Without further ado, let me bring in Mr. Teddy Covers.
Good to be here, Steve.
Excellent. Talk to me a little bit about, I always like to, when I'm betting, a lot of people are like, well, they're going for the futures. They're looking for the needle in the haystack. Who's going to win the tournament? I like to cherry pick individual games and find spots there.
Sure. Well, I mean, if you want to bet futures for conference tournaments, you're much better off taking whatever team you're looking to support on the money line in every game in the tournament. And if you let it ride, you will inevitably come up with a bigger return than in some of these fields where the house takeout is enormous, Stephen. You talk about that all the time.
Right, and especially if you got like a 7-point dog and you look at the power of taking a plus 250, boom, you bet $1, now it's $3.50, now you bet them again, and all of a sudden, 20-1, heck, you wind up engineering a 70-1 payout on some of these long shots to win it all. And also, it affords you the opportunity. Maybe your point guard gets hurt, something goes wrong, you don't like the matchup. Hey, I can freeze it, take my money off the table instead of being stuck with the bet where I have to keep rolling up. Essentially, I'm forced to keep rolling it over as well.
Sure, but I mean, basic conference tournament strategy for professional bettors in Las Vegas and around the country is, there's so many things to consider. First of all, there's a huge disparity between one bid leagues where you know that every team is going to go full gusto to try to get that NCAA tournament bid versus the multi-bid leagues, the big conferences, the majors per se, where the number 1 seed, they're already in. The number 5 seed's already in.
It's actually in their worst interest in many ways to play 3 games in 3 nights.
Oh, yeah. Look at Kansas is our number 1 example right here of a team that finished, they won the Big 12. They are the number 1 seed in the Big 12 tournament. They're playing in a very friendly venue that's going to be packed with Jayhawk supporters. And I want no part of Kansas over the course of the next week or the next 4 days. I mean, we got Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then a lot of championship games Saturday, a few left on Sunday. It really is 4 days of wall-to-wall for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, where there's so much going on. But, Kansas is your poster child for a number 1 seed that's all banged up, that has nothing to gain from winning this tournament, and that has every incentive not to show up and not to play for 3 days and 3 nights. So there are teams like Kansas in almost every major conference.
Would it be fair to say that you would have loved for the Big 12 tournament to be in Jerry's World in Dallas instead of in the Sprint Center in Kansas City? Because now maybe Kansas says, we got so many fans, and it's almost a home game, that we're less likely to tank. You still think they're going to?
I think it's every bit as good that it's at the Sprint Center, because that will be priced into the lines for the Jayhawks. There's no line for the Jayhawks opener yet. There's no opponent for the Jayhawks opener yet. They're going to get the winner of one of the play-in games tonight. But when you look at teams like Kansas, teams that are likely high seeds in the NCAA tournament, teams that have very little to gain from going balls to the wall over the course of 3 days and 3 nights or 4 days and 4 nights. They're easy faith, and it's basic strategy in these conference tournaments a lot of times to look to go against some of these top seeds in the multi-bid leagues.
Right, in the big boy league. Now the small guy league, if all the sharp money seems to always come on the better team, especially if they're rested against the team that won the night before, who looked good, and inevitably you see these lines open up 7 and they close 9, and the wise guys have learned that the incentive for that one bid league team, they're going to go all out. And I actually think, if anything, there might be slight bias in the refereeing that, hey, the conference wants their best team in there. They really don't want to have their number 6 seed to win their conference tourney and get in there, and it might make the difference in a block charge call. Your thoughts on that?
Are you saying that Pepperdine didn't get any calls last night against Gonzaga?
If I was a referee and I had to, and I went in there,
I had the same opinion, is all I'm saying.
Yes, and American number 6 seed was facing Lafayette, a pretty good 4 seed. I would make sure I didn't make a bad call that favored American.
Now, when it comes to these one-bid leagues, there are 2 things that I always do. Number 1 is that the superstars tend to stand out at this time of year. The team with the best player oftentimes has an edge over the best team. When you have one superstar who can create, even at a one-bid league level, it makes a huge difference compared to the teams that in general, we like the good teams. They're great to support in the regular season. They got all the chemistry. They're not always the best bets come tournament time. The other thing that I do in conference tournament play that's been a very successful strategy over the years, besides just looking for the best player, I'm also going back and looking at some of my preseason projections, Fez.
And this fascinated me. You said this.
Yeah, and you were like, really?
Yeah.
There are so many teams that all kinds of stuff happens throughout the course of the regular season, and they get hurt, and they suffer some tough losses, and they tank down the stretch. All of a sudden, if you play good basketball this week, you're live to accomplish the goal of playing in the big dance. And you find every year a handful of teams that had a very disappointing regular seasons, but the talent level is there. The talent level that was on display even back in September and October and November before the season started. If you can find those teams that are still live, that haven't quit on their coach and haven't quit on their season, man, you can make a lot of money riding some of these quote-unquote disappointing squads as they make a little bit of a conference tournament run.
Would UNLV qualify?
No, because UNLV is not going to.
Not very good.
And UNLV wasn't supposed to be the team to beat in the Mountain West coming into the season. You know, a team like New Mexico is more likely to qualify than a team like UNLV, in my opinion.
Sure. And New Mexico, obviously, they do travel well, and they used to pack the MAC here at Thomas and Mack. I don't know so much this year because they've been so disappointing. Let me ask you about some of the big boys. Who's going to bring it? I think Kentucky. Normally, that's the sort of team we might look if they had one loss. We might look for them to tank in the SEC championship, but the fact that they're chasing destiny and 40-0, I think they're going to bring it. Your thoughts? I'm
with you 100% on Kentucky. Kentucky has made things very, very difficult for me personally because they are the best team in the country. They're the best team in the country by a wide margin. They're the best team in the SEC by a very wide margin. You don't want to bet against them. I don't want to bet against the best team in the country, the best team in the et cetera, unless there's good reason to do so. There hasn't been a whole lot of good reasons to do so. And I don't see, and we'll talk about this in our next video when we talk about who has what it takes to win it all. But the Jayhawks are not a team I'm looking to fade in any way, shape, or form in the SEC tournament, whereas I'm with you. If they had one loss, no question we'd be looking to bet against this team. But right now, they're chasing destiny. They're chasing history. And from all the comments I've been reading out of that Wildcats locker room, they're very interested in taking home an SEC championship, if nothing else.
Let's talk about Duke. Historically, Coach K takes these tournaments, these conference tournaments, very seriously, always looking to win. He doesn't tank as well. Might that change this year? I don't think what they say that you become a creature of habit. I think they'll bring it hard every game.
And it's interesting because, North Carolina has been the ultimate bet against team in the ACC tournament over the years. The joke has always been that Roy Williams is a tee time set for Saturday. He doesn't want to be bothered with this. There's bigger fish to fry. As for Duke, I haven't read anything to indicate that the Blue Devils are not looking to take this tournament as seriously as they have in years past. That being said, Duke is not a deep team, and you may want to look at their conference tournament chances through the framework of the better they do this weekend, it might hurt them down the line. So if Duke does have a great weekend and cuts down the nets for the ACC title, that could put them in bet against territory moving forward in the big dance.
Same true for Virginia?
See, Virginia is an interesting story. Virginia and Wisconsin both, all right, who've had tremendous regular seasons, both squads who execute on both ends of the floor as well as you can execute in college basketball. But both teams suffered major injuries with Wisconsin losing Trayvon Jackson, they're starting their senior starting point guard. Virginia losing their only, their best player, the only guy who would be an NBA first rounder in Anderson. And those two guys are now both going to be transitioned back into the lineup over the course of the next week or two. I think that might be awkward, but we're not talking about second-tier players. We're talking about a starting point guard and the best player on the team for Virginia. And I think some of those transitions back in the lineup have the potential to be very, very awkward. Yet the markets are like to say, oh, Trayvon Jackson's back, let's bet up Wisconsin, Oh, Justin Anderson's back, let's bet up Virginia. And I don't know that'd necessarily be the right move to make.
Let's go out west. One more team, Arizona. Let's talk about, obviously, just hitting on all cylinders right now. Might their conference tourney here in Vegas at the MGM Grand, might they be looking to have a tee time on Saturday?
I haven't seen anything from Zona to indicate that, but it wouldn't shock me. That being said, Arizona is playing for the potential of a number one seed. They're probably right now, if there's a bubble between a number one and a number two, Arizona's on it. And I haven't done a ton of research on the Pac-12 tournament yet. It's still early in the week, and that tournament doesn't really get going for another couple of days. But this much I'm certain of is that Sean Miller's been a guy who's been very intent on winning conference tournaments. But I wouldn't be surprised they run into a Utah team or an Oregon team or a Stanford team that has the potential to knock them off. So I'm not sold on Arizona cutting down the nets here at the MGM.
And there's a lot of candidates that could knock them off, like you mentioned. That's a pretty deep
3.
12.
No, there's only 3.
Fair enough. Oregon State's not going to take it on? No.
No. Oregon State had their win over Arizona, and it came a long, long time ago on their home floor.
All the more reason that there's no chance that they're going to get. Let me ask you, my basic strategy always has been, if it's a conference tourney championship, and it's like a Big 12 game or a Pac-12 game, it can be happy action fun time. It can be like a reward for getting there, and you can see a very high-scoring game. But for a one-bid league, I'm always looking to play under. Now, in the semis and the finals, this really hasn't worked very well so far. Is there any reason why we're seeing higher-scoring games? One of the reasons, that my observation, seems like teams are more and more getting into they'll start fouling with 4 minutes left and go into a full-court press to try to get back into the game quicker. Your thoughts on why we've seen higher-scoring championship games so far?
A little bit of randomness. I mean, it's again, when you look at very small sample sizes, you're going to see a lot of static. Does this mean that we will inevitably see a return to the mean and the scoring go down throughout the course of the week in these title games? Remember, the other thing that we haven't seen a lot of 3 games in 3 nights, 4 games in 4 nights. Mm-hmm. And this week, it's all going to be 3-3, 4-4, even 5-5 potentially if some, big upsets happen throughout the course of the week. And then what happens by the time you get to the championship games, you get a lot of tired legs, you get a lot of jump shots falling short. And that certainly works towards your under theory. But, one thing you can do, and we haven't talked about this, there's a basic strategy. You have to go through your box scores every night before the next game because you want to bet against the aberrations. And I'm going to use a non-conference tournament game to give an example. I had a play on SMU on Sunday. They were laying 8.5 against Tulsa. What happened in the first half? Tulsa had a guy get hot. He hit 5 3-pointers. What happened in the second half? He hit 5 more 3-pointers, and Tulsa ended up covering the number. SMU won. I think they won by 6. They were laying 8.5. They didn't get there. But had there been a game the next day, Tulsa's your dead nuts bet against in this spot.
Absolutely.
When you have one guy that goes nuts from 3-point range, you want to pay attention. Are teams shooting jump shots, or are they getting the free throw line by driving? The jump shot shooting teams, not necessarily as good a bet the second day or the third days. You want to check those made 3-pointers. A team goes 16 for 27 from 3-point land one game, guess what? They're prime fade material the next game. Are they playing defense? Do they have depth? The team that has 5 starters go 35-plus minutes one day, not necessarily the best bet the next day, and certainly not the best bet the third day. So all of this stuff from box scores, simple box score analysis, can go a long way towards producing conference tournament profits.
Very good. So would you say you bet more during the conference tourney?
Without a doubt.
Than the big dance?
Absolutely. There's half, every line in the NCAA tournament is right, okay? You might find one mistake.
Except for your conference tournament game of the year. That one's going to be wrong.
In the big dance.
In the big dance.
The lines are right.
They're right, yeah. And maybe
in conference tournaments, there are issues where power rating, because in the big dance, everyone's coming to play every game. In conference tournaments, that's not the case, and you will find teams consistently that will play well above their power rating number and teams that will play well below their power rating number. This week only, I'm sure I'll have more bets that I personally make this week than next week, even though next week is the big dance, or at least in terms of the NCAA tournament. I think there'll be some good opportunities, as always, in the smaller tournaments because, again, numbers are set based on these season-long power rating numbers. And sometimes those season-long power rating numbers just don't mean that much in some situation.
And the poster child for this, of course, was our own Mountain West tournament when New Mexico literally takes over the Thomas and Mack. You go to the South Point locally, that's their local hotel. The entire South Point is like New Mexico alums that are just that go ahead and bus on over. So and never was reflected in the line. They just set it based on the power ratings. Guess what? New Mexico covers every game and wins the conference tournament when they were good. We'll see if they can do it this year when they're not so good and they wear pink uniforms some days, which I don't know if you saw that game. My own personal take is I don't think I've ever seen a pink out where the team won. Every time they wear like the breast cancer awareness uniforms. Did you see New Mexico's the one time?
I didn't, but I know that the fact that Hayden Fry, the legendary Iowa football head coach, made sure that the visitors' locker room was painted pink. And he had a pretty strong home field edge.
Kinnick Stadium, one of the greatest home fields of all time because of the locker room. Very good. Well, this has been fun breaking down some conference tournament basic strategy betting. When we come back, though, we're going to cut to the teeth. Teddy Covers is going to tell you who's going to win it all and who might be able to win it all. Stay with us. Pregame.tv. Good job.
Sure. That was long, though. That was way long.